Hi, I'm Vin. These are my onions. Have you ever considered the humble onion? A kitchen staple around the world, and has been for millennia. In today's video, we're going to peel back the layers of the onion. First looking at the history of Allium, cepa, then looking at how to plant, grow, and harvest them. And we'll finish it all off with some tips and tricks on dealing with an onion in the kitchen. Onions are so good that they were even once worshipped by ancient Egyptians as a symbol for eternal life. When King Ramses IV was mummified, the priests placed a perfectly sized onion in each eye socket. Onions were placed in other parts of the body during mummifications as well. Pictures of onions adorned temple and tomb walls. When they sealed the pharaohs inside their tombs, they left plenty of fresh onions to help royally deceased season their food while in the afterlife. I too love and worship onions, but please don't bury me with them. Onions are believed to have originated in the Middle East or Central Asia around 7,000 years ago, somewhere near Turkmenistan and Afghanistan. Beginning by the specific harvesting of the wild ancestor, Allium altaceum, or the Altai onion. Onions were one of the first crops to be cultivated by humans. Given that onions are one of the only vegetables that can be stored over winter by all natural means of preservation, it makes sense that it was the first major agricultural conquest of civilization. Sumer is given credit for establishing civilization and also for establishing the onion as a culinary staple. It is important to note, however, that wild alliums were growing in the Americas and in the Chinese mainland as well, and may have been cultivated earlier without a civilization's documentation. It's absolutely possible that onions were eaten by our prehistoric ancestors. Onions were quickly traded and spread wherever humanity spread. Sumer to Egypt, to Greece, to Rome, the classic historic progression. Romans especially loved the onion for the pungent ability to flavor their food and planted them everywhere that their soldiers went to help season their food on campaigns. Onions grew quickly and adapted to whatever environment they were brought to. The entire plant was edible and carried delicious flavonoids. The onion can be eaten at any stage. Even small seedlings are referred to as spring onions. When Christopher Columbus arrived in the New World, so did cultivated onions. Luckily for me, they're still growing here 600 years later. In fact, I live a short drive away from where they grow one of the most well-known onion varieties in the world, Walla Walla. A beautiful and delicious and large sweet onion. I grow them here because I live quite close to Walla Walla and can simulate their ideal growing conditions quite easily. This brings me to my first point about growing onions, and that is the variety or cultivar that you grow will depend on where you live. There are 3 groups of onions, and they're sorted by their grow length: long day, short day, and intermediate day. Your success with each variety will depend on your latitude. The closer to the equator you are, the shorter day onion you must grow. Way up here in the 7A hardiness zone, we grow long day onions. Notable long day onions are obviously the Walla Walla, the Spanish Sweet, and the Ailsa Craig. Long day onions require 14 to 16 hour stretches of daylight in order to form their bulbs. Short day onions, on the other hand, only need 10 to 12 hours, which means pretty much anyone in the southern United States can grow them without issue over the winter and spring. Short day onions are only really grown in places with mild winters. While I have successfully grown a short day onion here in the 7A, it did take a lot more care, time, and the fruit wasn't nearly as rewarding. Also, most of the plants bolted. This is generally the case when you grow the wrong cultivar or onion for the zone that you live in: bolting, poor bulb formation, and difficult germination. Some notable short day onions are the Vidalia, Texas 1015Y, and Bermuda. I did mention a third variety, which isn't talked about all that often, even though it does cover most of the United States, targeting the 32 degrees to 42 degrees latitude. The most notable variety is the Candy, which is often hybrid crossed with reds to make sweet red onions, sometimes called the Candy Apple Red. I did grow a candy variety this year. You can see me harvesting them in this video. They did quite well in my Longday region and were ready to pick just before the Walla Wallas were. Onions can be planted by seed or from starts. They are generally a hardy seed and can sometimes be planted in the fall or early winter for an early season crop depending on where you live. Onions like sandy, well-draining soil. If you have compact or clay soil, you'll need to amend with some rock phosphate to loosen up the soil a few months before attempting to grow onions. Onions like rich, sandy, and slightly acidic oil, so growing them right in a 50-50 mix of compost and sand is a pretty safe substrate to use. The most important thing to remember when planting an onion seedling is to bury only the roots. You can already see a small bulb forming at the base of an onion seedling. If that bulb gets buried with the roots, it won't grow anywhere near the size it would have if that bulb was placed above the ground. An onion's roots are really incredibly strong. The only thing that they need is water and needless area to multiply in. So after you get your seedling's roots in the final resting place, you just have to keep it watered and give it lots of sun. Now, the onion is a hardy plant, but it does need a little bit of help. While you wait for your onions to grow, be sure to check on the soil around them every few days and pick every single weed you find. Onions absolutely hate competition. They are a low maintenance plant to grow, but if you let any undesirables infringe on the onion's territory, they won't produce the big large onion bulbs that we are looking for. Okay, so harvesting the onion. You're supposed to wait until the neck is broken and lays down. The onion has stopped taking in nutrients at this point, and it is safe to remove it from the ground. There's no reason to keep it in there, really. Once it's removed, it's time to cure those onions. Curing the onion involves setting the onions out to dry upside down in the sun for a day or two, and then moving that onion into a very dry area with a lot of air movement and not in the sun, right? We want it to be dry, kind of cool. It can be warm, I guess, but not blazingly hot, not freezing cold, and a lot of air movement. So I use the space beneath my deck. It has ample airflow being outside, and it doesn't get wet from my irrigation or from inclement weather, right? The second stage of curing, once you have it in this new place, takes 3 to 4 weeks. So you know it's ready when everything has gone, papery and oniony, like when you find it in the store, right? No green left anywhere on the outside of the onion. You cut the remaining onion leaves and roots, and you store that onion in a cool, dry place, in a bag. And as said earlier, you can eat the onions at any stage, though, so you don't need to wait for the neck to break and cure them for a month before you use them. While you're growing the onion, if you want to eat an onion, you see one that's like, hey, that's the perfect sized onion that I want to eat. You should eat that onion. You should pull that onion and you should eat it. You can use the top of the greens also. You don't need to only eat the bulb. The tops are also nutritious and can be used kind of in place of chives, right? You most likely aren't going to need all of your onions as they all mature together. So you should probably be harvesting them as you need them and not just waiting for them all to be ready one day. So you have all of a sudden 45 pounds of onions, which is what happened to me. Okay, so we did it. We planted an onion. We grew the onion. We harvested the onion. We cured the onion. We now have onions. So all this talk about the what and the how, but not the why. Why did we grow these onions? Why should you eat onions? Beyond their delicious taste, rivaled only by other Allium species, they are absolutely jam-packed with minerals and vitamins. High in dietary fiber, onions contain high concentrations of folic acid, vitamin B6, magnesium, calcium, potassium, and phosphorus, as well as other trace vitamins and minerals. Beyond nutrition, onions have antimicrobial, anti-diabetic, anti-cancer, antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, anti-hypertensive, and antidepressant effects. So eating onions will literally help you feel better. Once you do have the onions on your table, the limits are endless. I chose the onion as my first vegetable to feature on my channel because it is really my favorite one. Caramelizing them, sauteing them, fermenting them, pickling them, eating them raw. I just love onions. Hopefully you do too, and that's why you're still here with me at this point in the video. Here are some sweet tips for dealing with the pungent veggie in the kitchen. If you have a real problem with crying when you cut onions, there are a few things to try. The first, you can put the onion in the fridge for about 30 minutes before cutting the onion. Cooler temperatures keep the allyl propyl disulfide more stable. The other surefire absolute way you will not cry when you cut an onion is to use a sharp knife. The reason why chefs don't cry in kitchens isn't due to years and years of chopping onions. It's because their knives are super sharp. When you cut with a dull knife, more of the cell's walls are torn and crushed, and more of that disulfide is released into the atmosphere, causing your eyes to unleash tears. A sharp knife just cuts through it and doesn't create a big explosion of gas into the air. So rinsing the onion after slicing or dicing will help reduce their pungency and reduce the odor left on your breath as well after eating. I also kind of believe that it takes away a little bit of the taste, so I don't do that personally. Soaking sliced onions in ice water for 10 to 15 minutes will help crisp them up. So if you're looking for a tangy addition to any meal, you can also put those sliced onions and a little bit of sugar into vinegar for 20 to 30 minutes, and you'll get a crisp, tangy, quick pickle, which I love so much. As my bonus layer, utilizing the skins, if you really want to make complete and total use of your onions, there are a few things you can do. I guess 2 is what I'm going to mention. I guess that's a few. The first you can do is you can turn the yellowy, papery skins into a natural organic dye. The colors range from red to yellow depending on the onion that you grew, but it usually falls into a nice earthy kind of orangish tone. This is an incredibly useful way to use the scraps of your onion. I usually say compost everything, but onion skins offer very little in the way of compost and are much better used to turn that gross white t-shirt you have into a slightly less gross orange t-shirt that you have. And if tie-dyeing or dyeing isn't your thing, you can still save the skins and then add them to a stock pot along with a lot of other veggie waste to make yourself a veggie broth. So look up how to do that if you want to do something else with your onion skins.